What happens when a really long-running, beloved series gets to a crossroads? Facing big character departures, these complex legal battles, and finally closing out mysteries that have been running forever. Imagine this show that millions love, and then suddenly the ground just starts shifting under its feet.
Yeah, it's a moment of huge pressure, isn't it? Not just for the story and the characters, but for everyone involved, really. The writers, the crew, everyone. And the decisions they make then, they can totally redefine the show's whole legacy. It could set a new course or maybe signal, the beginning of the end.
And that's exactly what we're diving into today. Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're peeling back the layers on Season 7 of the X-Files. This wasn't just like another season. It was genuinely a pivotal moment for this iconic sci-fi series. A time when massive decisions were happening, both on screen and, crucially, off screen, too.
Right. So our mission here is pretty comprehensive.
Yeah.
We want to unpack those big narrative conclusions fans waited ages for, and also the really intricate, often kind of turbulent behind-the-scenes stuff that shaped how it got made. And then look at how critics and audiences reacted, because that was pretty varied too. Basically, we want to give you a shortcut to understanding why Season 7 wasn't just another chapter, but really reshaped the whole X-Files landscape.
Yeah, exactly. And to do that, we've dug deep into a really comprehensive source, letting us explore, every angle of this fascinating time for the show. We're pulling out the key insights, those surprising facts, hoping to give you those real aha moments. So let's jump in. Okay, let's start with a storyline that was basically woven into the show's DNA from day one. The disappearance of Mulder's sister, Samantha. After 7 years, they finally gave us an answer to one of the biggest, most personal questions. What did that actually mean for Mulder and, for the show going forward?
It was huge, a massive decision, and definitely a gamble, something the producers really wrestled with. This wasn't just some random plot point. It was Mulder's whole driving force, right? His obsession, it all came from that personal trauma. You see it building in Xenon's sight, that's episode 10. Mulder gets, almost dangerously obsessed with other missing kids. He's connecting it all back to his own pain. And Scully's worried, She sees him getting way too emotionally involved, losing that detachment they need for the job.
Right. That sets it up perfectly. You see how raw he is before the big reveal, and then, oh man, the news about his mother, Tina Mulder, her suicide, that must have just floored him. Another layer of tragedy, and he couldn't even accept it at first, right? He tried to prove it wasn't suicide.
Exactly. And that new grief, that crisis, it sort of acts as the catalyst for the next episode, Closure, episode 11. In that one, Mulder meets this guy whose son also vanished. And this guy introduces Mulder to a concept that's really, it's not typical X-Files, the idea of walk-ins. They're described as these benevolent spirits, almost like guides, who take kids away from unhappy lives to somewhere peaceful. It was a surprisingly spiritual, almost ethereal explanation. Definitely not the usual aliens or government conspiracies. And the truth they reveal is that Samantha was abducted, yes, but by the cigarette-smoking man. She was forced to live on some abandoned army base, this awful life, before eventually becoming one of these walk-in spirits herself, finding some kind of peace, I guess.
So after all that searching, all the alien theories, it ends up being something much more personal. Tied to CSM, but ultimately for Samantha, almost peaceful. That's a massive shift from what we and Mulder always assumed. Yeah. It just completely changes his whole emotional landscape.
It really does. And giving such a definitive answer, that was a huge risk. You risk alienating viewers who had their own theories built up over 7 years. Paul Rabwin, he was one of the executive producers, he kind of explained their thinking. He actually said, and this is a direct quote, "It's been 7 years. I don't think any of us are going to miss Samantha Mulder." He went on, "That device and motivation were very strong in the early years of the show, but as the years have gone by, the speculation kind of melted away." So it shows this really pragmatic approach. Sometimes you just have to close the door on a long-running mystery before it becomes like a burden on the storytelling.
Yeah, that makes sense. Keep a mystery going too long, and it just gets frustrating or people stop caring. So this resolution, even if it wasn't what everyone wanted, it kind of freed Mulder, didn't it? His whole life's quest wrapped up. It let him maybe look at other kinds of truths. And definitely allowed his relationship with Scully to go somewhere deeper now that Samantha wasn't always this huge unspoken thing between them.
For sure. It allowed the show to move past that specific motivation for him, create space for new character developments, or at least the attempt at them. And this resolution, it also paved the way for other big shifts in the mythology during Season 7. It was a clear signal things were changing.
Yeah, looking bigger picture, these mythology episodes in Season 7 weren't just tying up loose ends. They were actively, dismantling the old conspiracy and rebuilding it into something new. Uncharted territory, really. Beyond Samantha, other big storylines came to these dramatic conclusions, but they were also setting the stage for some radical new directions later on.
It really sounds like they were trying to, I don't know, clear the decks a bit, and then maybe blow things up strategically to make way for something totally new. Oh, absolutely. The season starts with that two-parter, The Sixth Extinction and The Sixth Extinction 2, Amor Fati. Picks up right from the season 6 cliffhanger, right? Mulder's got that frenetic brain activity from the alien artifact. Skinner and Krichgau are trying desperately to figure out what's happening to him, what this object even is. And at the same time, Agent Diana Fowley comes back and boom, revealed she's working for the cigarette smoking man. Her duplicity is just laid bare.
Wow, yeah, high stakes right from the jump.
Yeah.
Back into the deep end of the mythology. And then Scully goes off to Africa, right? That was a big trip.
Huge. Scully goes on this incredibly important and dangerous trip to Africa, and she finds this alien object buried off the coast of Côte d'Ivoire. This is massive for the lore because it hints that alien life might be the origin of all religion, maybe even life itself, based on some ancient Navajo contact stories. It totally reframes the alien mythology, right? It's not just about invasion anymore, it's about creation. Meanwhile, back home, CSM is still manipulating Mulder, and this leads to Fowley's shocking death. She dies at CSM's hands, but it's sort of a sacrifice to help Scully find Mulder, a really brutal end for her.
So the scope of the conspiracy gets almost cosmic, but then you get an episode like Anami, which feels totally different, really zooms in on CSM and Scully.
That's a great point about character focus. Anami, episode 15, it really stands out. And it's fascinating because it was written by William B. Davis, the actor who plays CSM, his only writing credit. He pitched this idea to Chris Carter. What if CSM tries to seduce Scully, not romantically, but with knowledge, offering her this cure for all diseases? Carter was intrigued by that dark, manipulative angle. He got Frank Spotnitz to help develop the script. It apparently went through a lot of changes, but Chris Carter himself called it the creepiest episode of the year because of how CSM just plays on Scully's scientific mind, her empathy. It's this intense psychological game.
That is brilliant, taking their dynamic from just enemies to something way more twisted and personal. Yeah. And then the finale, Requiem. That's where it all explodes, right? The big cliffhanger.
Oh, yeah. Requiem, the last episode. It brings them back full circle, back to Oregon, where their very first X-File case happened. That return to the beginning, it contrasts sharply with this new wave of terrifying alien abductions happening there. And meanwhile, CSM, he's literally on his deathbed making one last desperate play to revive the old government conspiracy. He gets Marita Covarrubias and Krycek back together. It's like the old guard's last gasp.
And then the bombshell.
Yeah.
The cliffhanger that just changed everything we thought we knew about the show.
Totally. The finale ends with Mulder being abducted by an alien bounty hunter, along with Billy Miles and others. But the real shocker, the earth-shattering moment, comes after Skinner gets back to D.C. Scully tells him, really quietly but powerfully, that she's pregnant. She doesn't explicitly say Mulder's the father, but, the implication's overwhelming given everything. And that reveal, arguably the biggest plot twist in the whole series up to that point, it just completely changes her character, her future, the entire show's direction.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting. They're wrapping up this massive Samantha mystery, dismantling the old conspiracy, and then bam, out of nowhere, Scully's pregnant. What kind of ripple effect did that have? Not just for them, but for the whole show's focus.
It was a huge shift, wasn't it? From this external, cosmic alien conspiracy to something intensely personal, internal, grounded in human stakes. For 7 seasons, Mulder and Scully's relationship was professional, deep trust, codependent, but mostly platonic, right? At least on the surface. Scully's pregnancy just transforms that completely. It forces the show into totally new territory, themes of family, parenthood, the future, even what truth means for them now. It wasn't just a personal plot point, it challenged the whole truth is out there premise. Suddenly, the biggest mystery wasn't in the stars or files, it was literally inside Scully. It reframed that whole faith versus science thing for her, put her in this vulnerable position she'd never really been in, and it grounded the huge conspiracy in this really intimate human reality. A seriously bold move, signaling a clear break from the old formula. Set up a totally different path for the seasons that followed.
So while all these huge narrative shifts are happening, there's also just as much drama going on behind the scenes, right? Stuff that really impacted season 7 and what came after. Let's talk about the move to LA.
Yeah, and this raises that key question. Can changing where you film actually change the show itself, or just how people see it? The X-Files was filmed in Vancouver for the first 5 seasons, which gave it that distinct, often kind of dark, gloomy look. But starting with season 6 and carrying on through season 7, production officially moved down to Los Angeles.
Okay, let's unpack that. The LA move was a really big deal, wasn't it? Not just geography, but for the show's whole identity, its kind of soul. Why did it happen, and what was the fallout?
Well, the main driver was David Duchovny. He wanted to pursue his film career more easily and, crucially, be closer to his wife, Tay Leone, who was based in L.A. Chris Carter, the creator, he actually opposed the move. He really valued that Vancouver atmosphere, and it was cheaper to film there too. But at the end of the day, the Fox network officials, maybe prioritizing their star, maybe thinking about more Hollywood potential, they made the final call. California it was.
So the star's personal life directly leads to moving the whole production. How did everyone else react? The crew, the cast, and, importantly, the fans.
Well, it was mixed. Some crew weren't happy, some key people even left. But Kim Manners, the director, and Gillian Anderson apparently supported it, even if they weren't as loud about it as Duchovny. But a lot of fans immediately cried foul. They called it Hollywood-inizing the show. And it wasn't just about seeing palm trees instead of rainy forests. They felt the vibe changed. People claimed the plots got simpler, maybe more focus on big guest stars to appeal to a wider audience, and they felt it lost that unique, dark, often damp Vancouver look. You know, Vancouver's mist and forests gave it this gritty, almost real feel that was key to the mystery. LA is just brighter, shinier. Did the writers then lean into maybe more straightforward monster of the week stuff because the look changed? Or was it just unavoidable? Plus, moving to LA significantly jacked up the production costs. That definitely added financial pressure later on. That tension between, creative vision, network demands, and what the hardcore fans expect, that happens a lot with long-running shows. It sounds like this move wasn't just scenery. It really changed how people perceived the X-Files, maybe even the tone itself.
Oh, definitely. That perception of Hollywood-ishionizing, it suggested the show was losing some of its original grit. Whether that's totally fair or just nostalgia, who knows? But the feeling among a lot of fans was real. And that external pressure, plus the internal stuff, the rising costs, it all fed into the atmosphere and the creative choices of Season 7. And another really crucial thing shaping Season 7's story strategy was this feeling, this uncertainty about the show's future. A lot of the crew, the producers, they went into the season honestly believing it was going to be the last season of the X-Files. That thinking heavily influenced how they approached the storylines, how much closure they tried to provide.
So thinking it might be the end, what does that do to the writing? Did it push them to take bigger risks or maybe try to wrap things up neatly, almost like writing a series finale during the season?
Frank Spotnitz, the executive producer, he put it pretty plainly. He said, there was a pretty strong sentiment inside and outside the show that it was time to call it a day. So naturally, that led to this real effort to provide closure on different arcs. Give the fans some resolution, like Episode 4, Millennium. That was specifically written to wrap up Chris Carter's other show, Millennium, which had just been canceled. They brought Lance Henriksen back as Frank Black one last time, gave his story an ending within the X-Files world.
That's interesting. Using X-Files to tie up loose ends from another show. Kind of a unique move. And then, of course, the big one, the Samantha Mulder story.
Exactly. Deciding to finally resolve the Samantha arc in closure that was apparently heavily debated in the writer's room. Was it too soon? Was it overdue? But they went for it, largely because of that feeling that the end might be near. It was time to answer one of the show's biggest questions. Paul Rabwin's comment, again, about speculation melting away, it really captures that pragmatic thinking when you think you're heading towards a finale. Better to give an answer than just let it fade out.
So they were genuinely trying to give everyone, maybe themselves included, some sense of finality, some peace. But then that feeling changed. The possibility of more seasons came back.
It did. Despite that strong initial feeling that Season 7 was it, Paul Rabwin said that towards the end of the season, we found ourselves starting to get energized again, and surprisingly, everyone was kind of hopeful for another season. So that meant a big creative pivot, right? From let's wrap this up mode to finding new energy, new story ideas for the future. It really shows the show still had creative life in it, even under all that pressure.
Wow, that must have been a really tough tightrope to walk creatively. Trying to write satisfying endings while also keeping the door open for a future you suddenly might have. Did we almost get a totally different end to Season 7 because of that?
Yeah, possibly. David Duchovny revealed later on that if the show had actually ended with Season 7, the plan was for the final 3 episodes to be entirely focused on the main myth arc, a big conclusive wrap-up. But that plan got scrapped because, well, the show didn't end. It shows how adaptable they had to be, basically developing two different endgame scenarios depending on what the network decided. Which brings up another fascinating point. What happens creatively when the actors who live these characters get to write and direct? Season 7 saw a really significant amount of creative input from the main cast. David Duchovny, Gillian Anderson, even William B. Davis, they all wrote episodes, and Duchovny and Anderson directed too.
That is pretty rare, isn't it?
Hmm.
Especially for a show as big as X-Files was then. Seems like a huge amount of trust from the showrunners in their actors' understanding of the show. What did Gillian Anderson bring when she wrote and directed?
So Gillian Anderson, she made her writing and directing debut with episode 17, All Things. She'd actually pitched the basic idea to Chris Carter back during season 6, showing she was really thinking about Scully's journey. Her idea was for Scully to tackle a really deeply personal X-file, one where she's taken down a spiritual path when logic fails her. Anderson said she wrote the whole outline in one go after the concept came to her. Carter liked it because it was personal and quiet. And the episode really does offer this intimate look at Scully's inner world, her spirituality, her personal journey, in a way maybe only the actress playing her could truly capture. A nice, quiet counterpoint to all the big mythology stuff happening.
That makes total sense. Who better to explore Scully's internal conflicts, that faith versus science struggle, than Anderson herself? And maybe even more surprising, William B. Davis, the cigarette-smoking man he wrote in episode 2. That seems unusual for a villain actor.
Right. It's really intriguing. William B. Davis wrote on Emmy, episode 15, his only writing credit on the show. He pitched this really audacious idea, CSM trying to seduce Scully, not physically, but intellectually. Offering her this incredible medical knowledge, a cure for all diseases. Carter saw the chilling potential there, got Frank Spotnitz to help shape the script. It went through changes, but Carter ultimately called Anami the creepiest episode of the year. Why? Because of CSM's subtle intellectual manipulation of Scully. It showed this terrifying new dimension to their dynamic.
That is just fantastic. It's like getting a peek inside the villain's head, written by the guy playing him. Shows a different kind of evil. And Duchovny was involved too, right?
Yep, Duchovny was also creatively active. He co-wrote The Sixth Extinction 2, Amor Fati, with Chris Carter, contributing to the big season opener. And then he also wrote and directed episode 19, Hollywood AD. So you had these three key actors, Duchovny, Anderson, Davis, all deeply involved in shaping the stories and the look of the show that season. That level of involvement is pretty rare. It says a lot about the trust Carter had in them and how well they understood their characters and the whole X-Files world. It led to stories that felt really personal, really authentic.
Okay, this next point is huge. We're talking about a massive lawsuit and one of the main stars deciding to leave. How did this enormous behind-the-scenes drama directly impact what ended up on screen and the whole future of the X-Files?
Yeah, connecting this to the bigger picture, that David Duchovny lawsuit wasn't just some legal footnote. It was a major catalyst for fundamental change. It profoundly shaped season 7 and everything that came after. He filed it before the season even aired against 20th Century Fox. He claimed Fox had deliberately undersold the syndication rights to its own affiliates, basically lowballing the deals. And he argued this cost him a lot of money because his contract gave him like 5% of the profits, but he felt he'd only seen a fraction of what he was actually owed. A really serious accusation of, well, getting screwed financially by the network.
Wow. So he felt they were deliberately undervaluing the show in syndication to benefit their own stations and cutting him out of money he was owed. That's explosive. How did that whole legal fight end?
Well, it was eventually settled out of court. Duchovny reportedly got around $20 million. But the financial settlement definitely came at a cost to relationships, especially, it seems, his professional friendship with Chris Carter. There was an anonymous source quoted later, someone close to the production, who said something pretty brutal. They said, the whole lawsuit thing revealed that Carter knew Duchovny was getting screwed and didn't warn him. Carter proved where his loyalties lay with his actions. Now, that's just one source, but it suggests a really deep fracture in trust, maybe even a feeling of betrayal. It must have made the working environment incredibly tense during season 7.
Yeah, that's a really harsh take, suggesting Carter sided with the network over his star. And all this is happening while they're trying to make the show. The tension must have been immense. Did this pretty much guarantee Duchovny was leaving?
Well, both Carter's and Duchovny's contracts were up after season 7 anyway, so their futures were kind of up in the air. But after the finale, Requiem, Duchovny publicly stated he intended to leave the series as a full-time cast member. His reasoning was pretty clear. He said, I was kind of a free agent after season 7, and to me there was not much else to do in terms of the character. He added, "So it was really about me wanting to pursue other parts of my career as a writer, director, and actor." So that desire for new challenges, combined with, the bad blood and likely resentment from the lawsuit, it sealed his decision to step back.
Right, a mix of wanting to do new things creatively and probably just being done with the situation after the lawsuit.
Yeah.
And that must have immediately kicked off massive speculation about who could possibly replace Mulder, right?
Oh, instantly. Rumors flew and turned out to be true that a new character would come in for season 8. Fans went wild speculating. A lot of people online thought Mitch Pileggi, who played Stinner, might step up. Pileggi himself later called that idea ridiculous. But it just shows what a huge hole Duchovny's departure would leave. He was half the show, right? And as a direct result of him leaving, season 7 was the very last season to feature that original opening sequence. The iconic theme music, the spooky visuals. Gone after that. They updated it for season 8, a really visible attempt to, as they put it, renew and revive the series, signal a new era. It's just a striking example of how off-screen financial disputes can have such a direct, visible impact on a show's creative direction, its cast, even its branding. It forced them to imagine the X-Files without Mulder as the full-time centerpiece.
So season 7 was definitely this period of huge transition, right? Both narratively with all the closures and twists and with all that drama happening behind the scenes. How did that translate into how audiences and critics actually received the season?
Well, what's really interesting here is the contrast you see. On one hand, the viewership numbers, they did show a noticeable decline. But on the other hand, the show was still commanding really high advertising rates, which tells you it still had a very valuable, engaged audience, especially in certain groups. It kind of highlights how raw ratings don't always paint the full picture of a show's impact or its value in the market.
Okay, let's dig into those numbers, though. The data shows a clear downward trend. Was that just viewer fatigue setting in after 7 years, or maybe a reflection of all the uncertainty and changes we've been talking about?
Well, the season premieres, The Sixth Extinction. It debuted November 7th, 1999, pulled a 10.6 Nielsen rating, about 17.82 million viewers. Now, that was actually up a bit from the season 6 finale, which had around 15.86 million. But it was a definite drop from the season 6 premiere, which got over 20 million viewers. So, yeah, a dip right from the start.
And did that downward trend continue through the season?
Pretty much, yeah. Ratings generally slid downwards. The season low point was episode 18, Brand X, which only got about 10.81 million viewers. The finale, Requiem, ended with an 8.9 rating and 15.26 million viewers. That was down 14% from the season premiere and down about 4% from the previous season's finale. Overall, the show dropped significantly in the network rankings. It went from number 12 the previous year down to number 29 for the 1999-2000 season. The average viewership was about 14.2 million. Clear signs the mass audience was shrinking.
Yeah, those numbers don't lie. A definite decline over time. But you mentioned the advertising thing being strong. How could it still command big ad money with fewer people watching?
Right, this is where it gets interesting. In 2000, companies were still paying Fox around $225,000 for just a 30-second commercial during the X-Files. That's a really high rate, especially given the ratings trend. And the reason was largely who was watching. A lot of information technology companies, IT firms, were specifically buying ad time. Why? Because, as one industry report put it, many Codals IT geeks get their weekly fix of science fiction from this prime GM show. So even if the total numbers were down, the show was delivering this very specific, educated, affluent, tech-savvy audience that certain advertisers really, really wanted to reach. It shows influence isn't just about quantity, it's also about the quality and engagement of the audience. Which brings us to another key question. How does a show keep its dramatic spark when that core relationship, which was so central and ambiguous, starts to change? Critical reception for season 7 was really mixed to positive, I'd say, but with a lot of reviewers feeling ultimately that it was the weakest of the Duchovny and Anderson seasons.
Okay, let's get into that critical reaction. How do critics weigh, individual episode quality against the whole season's arc, especially when there's so much drama swirling around behind the scenes?
It's a tough balancing act for them, for sure. You had some positive voices like Eric Mink from the New York Daily News. He praised it, called the season proof that the X-Files still has more than enough creative life in it to justify an 8th season, unquote. He thought a lot of the standalone episodes were wonderfully creepy and called it a terrific bunch overall. So some critics still saw the magic in individual episodes.
But there were definitely louder criticisms too, right? What were the main things critics were picking up on?
Yeah, a really common critique came from Thomas Doherty at Cinefantastique. He argued the show was kind of hurt because the Mulder and Scully partnership had settled into this. His words were, "comfortable groove of a modern two-career marriage supportive, professionally rewarding, and utterly sexless." He felt it lost some of that tension, that will they won't their energy. And Doherty also really hammered on the rise of what he called self-parody episodes. That term really stuck to season 7 for some.
Self-parody. You mean like the show was making fun of itself?
Yeah.
Winking at the audience.
Exactly. He pointed to episodes like First-Person Shooter, which had, killer cockroaches scurry and living dead roam, or that really meta episode, Hollywood AD, where Téa Leoni and Gary Shandling play Mulder and Scully in a movie. Doherty argued this kind of humor made viewers stop taking the show seriously. Like the creators themselves were saying, yeah, even we can't really believe this stuff anymore. That kind of meta-commentary, while maybe clever sometimes, can really pull you out of the story, undermine the show's serious tone if you're not careful.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. If the show itself seems like it's rolling its eyes, why should the audience invest? What about other critics?
Tom Kesinich, who wrote a book analyzing these later seasons, he was pretty positive about the first half of season 7, but he got more negative later on because of what he called the season-long backstage wheeling and dealing, meaning the Duchovny lawsuit stuff. He felt even the strong finale couldn't quite shake off the doubts about where the show was heading. And the AV Club, they described the season overall as flagging and having significant problems. So a widespread feeling that something was a bit off, even with the good moments.
So really a mixed bag critically. Were there specific episodes that got singled out either for praise or for being particularly weak?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Ex-Cops, that crossover with the reality show Cop PS, that was widely praised. Called exceptionally clever, even funniest of the series by some. Duchovny's Hollywood AD also got good marks for its self-reflexive comedy, but not everything worked. Gillian Anderson's episode, All Things, despite being personal, got called dull and heavy-handed by some critics. And Brand X, that one was even labeled a waste of an episode. So you see, it was a season trying different things, trying to maybe reinvent itself a bit while dealing with its own history, and the results were really all over the map critically, reflected that transitional experimental vibe. But what's really fascinating here is the sort of disconnect you see between some of those critical reviews calling it flagging and the fact that the industry itself kept giving it awards. Even in a season facing all these challenges and criticisms, the X-Files season 7 still racked up significant industry recognition. It consistently showed its technical and artistic strength.
That is a really good point. Quality can still be recognized even when other things are going on. So, despite the mixed reviews and falling ratings, it was still winning prestigious awards. What did it actually win?
Well, it got 6 Primetime Emmy nominations that year, and it won 3 major ones. The episode First-Person Shooter actually won 2 Emmys, Outstanding Sound Mixing for a Drama Series, and Outstanding Special Visual Effects for a Series. And that was a big deal, right? That episode was set inside a virtual reality game. It needed really cutting-edge visual effects for TV back then, genuinely pushing boundaries. The sound design was also crucial to creating that whole digital world feel. And then the episode Thief, that one for outstanding makeup for a series, just showed the crew's consistent talent for visual craft.
Okay, so even if the story wasn't always hitting for everyone, the actual production quality, the effects, the sound, the makeup, that stuff was still absolutely top tier and getting recognized. Were there other awards besides the Emmys?
Oh, yeah. The show itself won Best Drama Series, and Gillian Anderson won Best Actress at the Teen.com Entertainment Awards, which shows it's still connected with a younger audience, too. Both Duchovny and Anderson got Screen Actors Guild Award nominations for their performances, showing respect from fellow actors. Plus, Brand X got nominated for an Environmental Media Award for its theme, and Rush got an International Monitor Award nomination, likely for technical work.
Wow. That really does suggest that even when a show is going through huge changes, dealing with intense backstage drama, facing a shifting audience, those high production values, the strong performances, they can still shine through, still get recognized by peers, even by new audiences. It's a real testament to the talent involved, even during such a turbulent time.
Exactly. It really shows how a show can have different kinds of impact, right? Critical buzz, audience size, industry respect, they don't always line up perfectly. Season 7's awards really highlight that it kept this remarkable standard of excellence in key areas, even with all the narrative and production hurdles it was facing. It proves that commitment to quality TV didn't really waver, despite everything.
So there you have it, Season 7 of The X-Files. Undeniably a time of massive shifts, a real turning point. We saw these definitive narrative closures, especially Mulder's long personal quest for Samantha finally ending, maybe unexpectedly, but at the same time, these groundbreaking new plots started, none bigger than Scully's pregnancy reveal, which just radically changes the whole core of the show.
And all that on-screen stuff was happening against this backdrop of equally significant, really turbulent behind-the-scenes drama, Duchovny's lawsuit against Fox, his eventual decision to leave. That sent seismic shocks through the production. It forced the show to adapt, figure out a future without one of its main stars, a real test of its resilience.
Right. And despite those mixed critical reviews, some calling it flagging, and the clear drop in overall viewership, the show still held on to its value for advertisers. And crucially, it kept getting recognized with prestigious industry awards, proving its quality and impact endured, even during that really transitional, difficult phase.
So what does it all mean for the X-Files legacy? I think this season really showed that a long-running show, even when it loses a central star, even when it's dealing with intense internal conflict and external pressures, it can still find ways to reinvent itself. It managed to wrap up huge, long-held mysteries while also introducing fresh, totally paradigm-shifting developments that reshaped its entire foundation.
It really leaves you thinking, doesn't it? When a show's core gets rocked like that, when pieces are taken away and new ones added, does that signal the end? Or is it just the start of a different, unexpected, maybe even more interesting journey?